You're listening to the Yoga for Balance podcast. I'm your host, Heather Pugh. Thank you so much for listening. Quite a bit has changed around here since the last time that I recorded the podcast. So thank you so much for sticking around, or if you just started listening, I am so happy to be here recording a new episode for you. I recently moved from San Diego, California to Austin, Texas with my family. So we've been here about a month, just getting settled in. And the other big life change has been this second pregnancy with our second son on the way come November 22nd. And my bet is that he might be coming a little early, but time will tell and we will find out. So I thought in this episode I would give just that little bit of life update and then talk about how yoga has supported me not only in the first pregnancy with my son Ajja, afterward, and also in this pregnancy. So some of the things I'd like to chat about are just things that I learned in my first prenatal yoga training, some things that I've found to be really useful as I've used yoga as a tool for all of my pregnancy moments, and any other insights that might be helpful for you if you are on that journey or considering going down it in the future. I did my first prenatal yoga training while pregnant with my first son Ajja in 2022. He was born March 17th in 2022, so he's about a year and a half now. And during that pregnancy, I knew I wanted, for my own personal practice, to have more information about practicing yoga safely, how to apply just some general principles to any practice, because I did quickly find that there were limited resources out there in terms of in-person classes, which are typically my preference. If I can get an in-person experience, I prefer that. I love that, getting together with other yogis and connecting in our practice in person. And I also found that even online, there were very limited resources as well for what I was looking for my personal practice. So the nice thing about taking a training for me was kind of learning these general principles that I could then apply to my home practice, as well as any practices I would find online or in person, even if they weren't prenatal specific. And I think that's probably one of my biggest takeaways, that if you do have some of this basic foundational information, you are able to continue a normal practice more or less, obviously with some exceptions, and we'll talk about that today as well. And before we dive into yoga for pregnancy, I just wanted to take a step back and share how I think yoga has also prepared me for pregnancy, having a regular practice leading up to both of my pregnancies, because I think that's something that I haven't heard talked about a lot, but I think is very beneficial for anyone that is considering starting a family in the future. I think one of the things that yoga has helped me with is kind of that overall flexibility, not only in my body, but in my mind. In my body, for instance, I was lucky enough to get away from my first pregnancy without any stretch marks. And I know that might seem small, but for someone who lives in a bikini a lot of the year in warmer places, it's nice to know that I didn't have to deal with stretch marks, even though many women do have to experience that. And I think having a regular yoga practice where I'm constantly stretching, working on flexibility, is something that probably did help with that, even if it is kind of a small aspect of the overall pregnancy journey. So I just thought that was an interesting little tidbit from the first pregnancy that I do think had something to do with having a regular yoga practice leading up to that pregnancy. And then once I got into the pregnancy, having a practice already in place, not only as a student for many years, but as a teacher, I didn't feel like I all of a sudden had to get all of these new tools to help me through a really major life transformation. I did have a lot of tools already at my disposal, and I was able to kind of pick the ones and the aspects of the practice that would suit me for the different periods of time within that pregnancy, which are very different as we go through different stages and the ways that we're affected by each of those, not only physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So once I did get into the first pregnancy, I will say actually with both of them so far, the beginning is to me the most difficult time of the pregnancy, that first trimester. For me especially, I did experience pretty severe morning sickness, especially with Ajja, my first son, even worse than my second pregnancy, where I was extremely nauseous and I was sick to my stomach most days from about 6 to 12 weeks. And at that time, you're not physically showing, I wasn't telling anyone. I was waiting for that, between the first and second trimester mark so that I felt more comfortable sharing that openly. And that was with everyone. I didn't share with my parents, my mom, my sister, the biggest secret you'll ever keep. So that was really tricky because, mentally you're going through this major transformation, knowing I'm going to become a parent, I'm having a child. Wow, this is incredible. What a life-changing experience. And then at the same time, the closest people in your life don't necessarily know. And even the non-close people in your life, my students didn't know. The people in line at the grocery store with me as I was feeling nauseous didn't know. So it's just really hard mentally, I found, to be going through such a transformational stage without having that kind of social support system around you to share what's happening and what's going on. I did find that having some books to read that kind of walked me through the different things happening during different weeks. I'd have those week by week books. There's 2 of them that I read pretty regularly that I'm actually using to hoist up my microphone right now. And one of them is the Mama Natural Week by Week Guide to Pregnancy and Childbirth. And then the other one is the Motherly Guide to Becoming Mama. So I will link both of those books up on the podcast notes. But those books did help me feel connected to where I was in the timeline of growing our baby and my pregnancy, and at least did give me some things to go off of in terms of feeling a little more connected to the process and where I was, and that I wasn't alone in how I was feeling and what I was experiencing. And then when it comes to yoga physically, I wasn't limited much in terms of growing the baby yet, because the baby is so small in that first trimester. You're not showing, the biggest thing was the nausea that was limiting me in my practice, as well as my teaching and demonstrating and things like that. So something that you already at the beginning start to probably want to limit is doing yoga in a more heated setting if it's bothering you, if it's making that nausea worse. So I did find that while I had to teach in a heated setting, because that was the style of class that I was teaching at the time with both pregnancies, I did want to limit how much I was doing during that time. So I started demonstrating even less so that I would limit how much my body heat was going up. You don't really want your internal temperature to be over 100 degrees. So I wasn't physically doing the practice as much as I might otherwise in terms of demonstrating, which I don't always demonstrate anyway, but especially during pregnancy, I started to limit that. And then my personal practice as well, I just found that I could practice still a vinyasa practice, but I didn't lean toward that very athletic power vinyasa in a heated room, very high heat. I already at the beginning, because of how nauseous I was feeling, was not craving that in my body. So the biggest thing I would say, you may or may not experience nausea in that first trimester, is just to listen to your body, because physically you might be able to get into a lot of the postures or asanas that you could have prior to pregnancy. But depending on how you are feeling, you may still not want to go there. But knowing the rest of the pregnancy is going to change things a lot, maybe you want to kind of maintain a similar practice to what you were doing prior to pregnancy, and you feel good doing that. Listen to your body and just take it day by day. Some of the things that, kind of general practices you can start to implement is, starting to limit. And this really kind of gets closer to the second trimester on, where once your bump starts to show, once my bump was showing with the baby, which definitely happens sooner the second time around, is to limit twists. So you're not going too deeply into them. You could definitely still twist a little bit. We're just wanting to twist from the heart upward and just not going super deep into that. So focusing again, kind of from the shoulders up, adding that little bit of a twist for your spine and neck if you're twisting, but not going much more deeply than that. And once the bump is there, obviously not lying on the belly. So I'd say that's probably one of the most disruptive things in a regular practice. If you're just taking a normal non-prenatal class, that will come up often is a teacher guiding you to your stomach for a pose on your stomach. And that would be cobra or locust or floor bow, anything like that. And of course, that is not going to be comfortable or good for you to do once the bump is there. So for those, I tend to go to puppy pose. That'll be kind of my first go-to heart opener. Once they take me to a locust or a cobra, I'll go into puppy pose instead, or that's what I'll teach in my prenatal yoga classes for heart opening. And that's where your hips are directly over your knees and you're just sliding your hands forward. And that gives you a whole lot of space for your heart, for your shoulders, and for your belly. And another thing you could do throughout the class, and this is something especially now, and we'll talk about this in the third trimester as we get along, is using blocks. So definitely if you don't have blocks at home and you primarily practice at home on YouTube or just a home practice, incorporate blocks. They aren't super expensive to get a set for home, and they will be your best friend. I use them every single class I do to give me extra space. I use them in down dog. I use them in forward folds. I'll even put them underneath my forearms so that it gives me a little support in a forward fold and I'm not just hanging in ragdoll. It gives me a little bit of something, because things just start to get more difficult as you get along. So blocks are your best friend. So again, even in puppy's pose, in child's pose, if you find you need a little bit more space, you could put blocks underneath your hands, even starting in that second trimester, especially toward the end and into your third trimester. And if you're going into numerous positions on your belly in a class and you wanted to switch it up and do something a little bit different, you could go also into a just seated heart opening back bend by interlacing your hands behind your back, either from cross-legged or on your knees, and stretching your hands behind you. I'll sometimes add a little bit of neck love to that, bringing an ear toward each shoulder, or rolling my head and neck, because that always feels nice, adding a little bit of neck and shoulder love in there as well. And finally, one other back bend that, again, if you were being guided to your stomach and you don't want to go there, is your camel's pose. And we don't want to go too deeply into that, because that can be a very deep back bend, but it can also be pretty mild. And that's something I love about it, is you can really taper it to what feels right in your body at that time. So again, camel, just coming up on your knees, hands to your low back, and just arcing your back and your spine any amount, just being careful to not go too deeply into your low back area, and to find some core support around that as you just add a little bit of a gentle back bend there. And finally, the biggest thing at the very end, getting into that late second trimester, third trimester, as the baby gets bigger, is you don't want to be lying on your back because that's putting a lot of weight on your vena cava and cutting off your circulation. So we want to limit that. So anything on your back, if it's for a short period of time, it might feel okay, like few breaths in your child's pose, not too bad. Even a little bit of a bridge, not too bad. I would say wheel, starting to get a little too deep. That's something I don't like to do in my late pregnancy. And, but that's something that, depending on how you're feeling, listen to your body again. Maybe you feel really good and you can go into that. But I would limit super deep back bends like that at this point. These tend to come up toward the end of class as you are gearing up for your Shavasana. And for Shavasana, I would say rather than lie flat on your back, there are a couple of different options. One is a supported Supta Baddha Konasana. This is one of my favorites if you have the right props for it. So you would need 2 blocks and a bolster, and you would set those blocks up toward the back of your mat on a medium height and a high height. So you're kind of creating a ramp, and then you put your bolster over that or a big pillow over that. And then you would lie with your sacrum at the end of the bolster and your back lying against the bolster. So you're upright a little bit, so you're kind of on an incline. And then you can either have your legs straight in front of you or feet together and knees out wide. And that one can feel really nice for adding a little bit of extra heart opening back bend and not too much pressure with the baby there on your low back. But one of the poses that's the easiest to do for your final rest is lying on your left side. So you would just lie on your left side. You can use a pillow or a bolster between your knees, something underneath your head or even between your arms. So you're creating this nice little cradle shape or fetal position so that when you are finally resting, you have that optimal blood flow. So that is the pose that I tend to go into most often. And lastly, let's just chat about inversion. So prior to pregnancy, I love to practice headstand, work toward my forearm stand, handstand, shoulder stand, all of the upside down poses. And in pregnancy, I find that at the very beginning, you might still feel comfortable doing these inversions. Again, depending on how nauseous you're feeling, it may or may not feel welcome to do those in your practice. But you might feel still comfortable kind of at the beginning. Your center of gravity isn't super off since you don't have a big belly quite yet. So it might be something that you are comfortable doing at the beginning, but you also might be cautious to do at the beginning, knowing that the very beginning is the time where we are concerned most about miscarriages and things like that happening. And not to say that inversions would impact that, but let's say you fall out of your inversion, that might be a concern for you. So if you don't have a confident, strong inversion practice, I'd say pregnancy is not the time to do it. If you wanted to do something simple like legs up the wall, that is completely comfortable and safe. That is totally fine. Or just hanging upside down, things like that. Do it. That would be great. But I wouldn't say this is the time to get your handstand down while you're pregnant. So I would just proceed with some caution around the inversions that you're doing in pregnancy. And for me, even with a strong headstand practice, again, I might have done that kind of toward the beginning, but as soon as I started getting my belly in the first pregnancy and this one, I did stop doing my inversions because at that point, I just didn't feel like I needed to be doing them in my practice. I could wait until I was no longer pregnant, and I felt a lot better about doing that as well. And as I like to say, second trimester for me, both times around, was like a second wind. So when we're looking more at the mental and the spiritual side of things, I just found this big boost of energy there in that second trimester. I was no longer so tired. You have this confidence that you've made it to that big milestone past the first trimester. You're telling your friends family, you're telling your workplaces. I was telling my yoga students, you're starting to show. So even if you haven't told people, they may notice that you are pregnant. So all of those things involved, I think, just make you feel a little more confident, a little more comfortable. And physically, I was not as drained as I was in that first trimester. It was almost like clockwork that as soon as second trimester started, I felt so much better nausea-wise and wasn't as impacted by the smells around me. That's like the weirdest thing. In that first trimester is every smell is so strong and pungent. I could literally pick up a whiff of what a yoga student had eaten before the class. I'm like, really? Did you have to have shrimp tacos before you came here? But so odd, these things that our bodies do when we move into pregnancy and get all of those hormones pumping. And speaking of hormones, emotions, oh my goodness. The first trimester, your emotions are just running wild. At least for me, they were. It would not take much to get the tears to start flowing. I was just so sensitive to everything around me. And it was beautiful because I just felt so much, but it was so strong as well. And I found that definitely in the second and third trimester that wasn't quite as strong, but it definitely is stronger of a feeling than pre-pregnancy. So something to be aware of that might show up on and off of your yoga mat as well. But something that I love about this practice is, again, it is a tool. So if there's a need to cry it out, you just want to tap into those emotions and everything that you're feeling, your yoga mat is a great place for that, especially you're home, you're doing your practice, you're doing a practice online or just a nice home practice. You can put on some music that taps into those emotions. And if you need to cry, cry it out. If you need to cry in a yoga class, cry it out. I think it's such a beautiful thing when I'm teaching and I hear a student crying if that's what they need to do, often happening in pigeon pose. And if that's the case, let it out because it is a beautiful space to give yourself that space to do so. And I find that it is a place that I do that myself. When I found I haven't tapped into my emotions and they're kind of bottled up, being on my yoga mat is a beautiful place to just let those emotions flow and to sit with them and let them air out so that they have the space to just be. So all of those things considered, there aren't that many things that you have to do to adapt your regular yoga practice to work for you and benefit you throughout preparing for pregnancy, during pregnancy, post-pregnancy. It's something that definitely helped me bounce back mentally, spiritually. After having my son Ajja, I did breastfeed him exclusively for at least 10 months, and then we had to supplement a little bit there with breast milk. But physically being able to unwind the tension that went with breastfeeding a baby, you're in these awkward positions a lot of the times. This pregnancy, I have invested in a few things like a nice chair that will help me to more appropriately sit up and be comfortable. But having proper posture and being able to work on your posture in between feeding sessions is huge. And I know you're exhausted, you barely have time for anything, but I promise you, if you can carve out that time for yourself, every time I was able to carve out, even if it was 20 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour into my day when little Bubs, as I like to call him, Ajja would go down for a nap. If I took one of those naps to do a practice, however long it was so beneficial. And when I did go back to teaching and occasionally being able to take an in-person class, it was huge. It felt like coming home, coming back to myself. It was, of course, hard to leave my son. I love him more than anything. He's amazing. But knowing my husband is amazing as well and had that opportunity to connect with him one-on-one, it was healthy for all of us. For me to return to my yoga mat and do something that I'm passionate about. I love to teach. I love to practice. Always a student first, teacher second. So having that practice in my life again after having our son was just so profound. And, whether it's yoga or meditation, breath work, going for long walks, going for roller skates, whatever it is that brings you joy, that fulfills you, those are things that I love. It helped bring me back to myself, helped me find peace. It helped me physically recover from the pregnancy and get back to where I felt good in my body, I felt good in my mind, good in my spirit. So all of those practices can help you get there and help you return to you after having a baby. And now that we are in the third trimester together here, I'm 33 weeks, 8 months. One of the biggest things happening in my world is just wrapping my head around having another baby and about to be at that point of labor and delivery. And I know for women and myself especially, this can be mentally one of the biggest aspects around pregnancy and having children is that final moment of this could be very traumatic, this could be peaceful, this could be life-changing, everything. And I would say since I've had one baby and things went mostly smoothly with that pregnancy and that birth, I do feel more confident and comfortable and relaxed going into the birth of our second baby boy here. And I don't feel as intimidated or scared about what might happen, what could happen. I instead am trying to trust and lean into I'm doing everything that I can to prepare for that moment. I have an incredible, loving, and supportive partner I'm so grateful for to be here with me on this journey, supporting me, holding my hand, massaging my calves that are so sore. And I know that, and I trust that everything will work out and that the birth, the delivery will go smoothly. Because what is the point of worrying? Of course, things can happen. And I know should they happen, we'll be open to adapting our plan and doing what we need to do to get our baby boy out healthy as much as we can control. And that's all we can do. Worrying about it in advance is not going to help things. Because if something's going to happen, it's going to happen. And worrying about it is not going to make anything better. It's just going to add stress leading up to that moment. So trying to lean into that trust, the confidence that I've done this before. Many women have done this before. Any challenge that arises, we will figure it out and we'll get there. And I just can't wait to meet our baby boy in 2 months or less. So stay tuned. I will be happy to share more updates with you on where we are. And in terms of even teaching, I'm excited that once we have this baby, I can get back to teaching with this move to Austin, Texas. Until we have the baby, I'm taking a little bit of a break on my in-person classes, which feels very strange. It's the first time I have not been teaching in-person classes in a long time. So it's been a little strange not having my community, not having my students. I miss you guys. And I look forward to getting back to my classes once we have our baby boy a few months after that, when I'm ready to teach again. And in the meantime, I look forward to touching base with you here on the podcast. I plan to record another prenatal video since that's the stage I'm in. I'm in my 3rd trimester, so a nice late pregnancy practice for you that will go on to my YouTube, Yoga for Balance with Pugh. And besides that, it's been great reconnecting with you. Thank you so much for listening. And I look forward to sharing more episodes here on the Yoga for Balance podcast with you soon. Until next time.